A young girl pulls a 1500-year-old sword from a Swedish lake. A Bronze Age warrior sword sits forgotten in a Northern Ireland barn for half a century. An infamous pirate ship sits undiscovered off North Carolina for hundreds of years. And a first printing of the Declaration of Independence is found stuffed behind a flea market painting. These are more items found locked away. In 1989, a man was at a flea market in Adamstown, Pennsylvania, looking for a painting to hang on his wall. He picked one out, mostly because he liked the frame. When he got home, he removed the canvas from the frame and noticed there was something tucked behind it. It was a folded sheet of old yellowed paper. At first, he wasn't sure what it was. He took it to Sotheby's, which is basically this high-end auction house where rare stuff like old documents gets checked and authenticated and then sold off to collectors. Well, the experts realized that this was one of the first printed copies of the Declaration of Independence, originally printed on July 4th, 1776. Only 24 copies of the first printing were known to exist at the time, so this was an incredible find. Sotheby's described it as, quote, one of the most important American documents to come to light in decades. 2 years later, in 1991, it was sold at auction for $2.42 million. And in 2000, it was resold for $8.14 million. In 1934, a teenage boy named Henry W. Berg was poking around the cellar of an old building in Baltimore, Maryland, when he hit something hard under the floorboards. Curious, he pried it up and found a copper pot. And when he opened it, he couldn't believe his eyes. It was full of gold coins. And over the next few years, Henry and his friends dug a bit more and found 6 pots containing thousands of coins, all dating back to the early 1800s. Nobody knew who'd hidden them, but it was obvious someone had buried the stash on purpose. Word spread and collectors and historians showed up. Some think it was buried during the Panic of 1837, when banks were failing and people were desperate to hide their money. Others guessed it might have been a merchant's savings that he just never came back for. Eventually, the coins were cataloged and studied, but the original owner was never found. In the summer of 2018, an 8-year-old girl named Saga Vanacek was hanging out with her family near Lake Vidalstern in southern Sweden. That year was brutally hot, and the water level in the lake was way lower than usual. Saga was walking along the edge, picking things up, looking for cool rocks and shells, that sort of thing. And then she grabbed something long and heavy out of the water. At first she thought it was a stick. Then she noticed it had a grip. She lifted it up triumphantly as a ray of sunshine descended upon her. She was holding a sword. I have no evidence for the, ray of sunshine part or the holding it up triumphantly even, but that's just what I'm picturing. But the rest is true. Saga yelled out to her dad, "Papa, I found a sword." Her dad thought it was just a stick at first too, but then he noticed it was rusted, clearly very old. Once archaeologists got a look at it, they immediately knew that this was real. The sword dates to around 300 to 500 CE, which makes it about 1500 years old. Now, headlines at the time said it was a Viking sword. It isn't technically. It's from the migration period, which came before the Viking Age, but that just makes the find even rarer. Just recently, during construction work in Budapest, workers came across this large stone coffin buried underground. Archaeologists were called in and confirmed it was a Roman sarcophagus dating back to around the 4th century. The stone lid was still sealed. That almost never happens. Most Roman tombs were looted hundreds of years ago. When archaeologists carefully opened the sarcophagus, they found a skeleton laid out inside, along with some burial items. And considering how long it had all been sitting there, it was damn near mint. Nothing had been taken. The coffin had been closed for about 1700 years. News of this just came out in December. In northeastern France, archaeologists discovered these ceramic jars buried in the ground. When they opened them, they found tens of thousands of Roman coins inside. Coins dated between 280 and 310 CE, a pretty unstable, violent period in the Roman Empire. This was money someone intentionally hid. At the time, people buried valuables to protect them from invasions. Hide it now, come back later. These jars were very likely someone's life savings. They would have buried them, shed a little tear, and then, expected to come back for their loot once things settled down. Obviously, they never did. So the jars stayed underground for about 1800 years. In 1996, divers off the coast of North Carolina came across a shipwreck sitting on the ocean floor. It It was loaded with cannons and heavy equipment, clearly from the 1700s. From the start, researchers knew that it was important. What they didn't know was exactly what ship it was, so the wreck just stayed there. It was studied and documented, but officially, it was unidentified. Well, over the next 15 years, archaeologists slowly gathered evidence. The location matched historical records. The cannons fit the time period. Artifacts recovered from the site lined up with what would have been used on pirate ships in the early 18th century. Eventually, the wreck was confirmed to be the Queen Anne's Revenge, the flagship of the pirate Blackbeard, which sank in 1718. That meant the ship had been underwater for nearly 300 years. People were diving over one of the most famous pirate ships in history without realizing that they were. In 1965, a man named Ambrose Owens was fishing by a river in Northern Ireland when he spotted something sticking out of the water, a sword. For whatever reason, it didn't seem all that important to him, so he just stored it away in an old barn on his family farm. And for over 50 years, that's where it sat, completely forgotten, until Ambrose's brother Maurice Owens came across it while cleaning the barn. Maurice passed it to an archaeologist involved in a local history project, and that's when its real story came out. The word came back that the sword was 2,600 years old. Unbelievable, said Maurice. Turns out the sword is a genuine Bronze Age blade from around 800 to 600 BCE. Archaeologist Paul Logue called it fantastic and said, quote, "This is only the second time I've ever held a real Bronze Age sword, and the significance is amazing. Definitely this didn't belong to your normal lady or normal bloke. This has come from a high level in society." In 1957, the city of Tulsa buried a brand new Plymouth Belvedere inside a concrete vault. It was meant to be a time capsule. The plan was to seal the car underground for 50 years, then dig it up in 2007 and see how well it held up. The vault was locked, buried, and left alone. When the time came to open it in 2007, the results were not what anyone expected. Water had leaked into the vault over the decades, the car was badly rusted, the inside was destroyed, and it certainly was not drivable. Still, the car had been completely sealed off while major events happened above ground. The Cold War, the moon landing, the rise of computers and the internet, that it sat underground through all of it. For most of the 20th century, one of the imperial Fabergé eggs was nowhere to be found. What the hell am I even talking about? What are these Fabergé eggs? Well, these were ridiculously fancy jeweled eggs made for the Russian royal family in the late 1800s. They'd usually have little surprises inside of them. They're like royal Kinder eggs. After the Russian Revolution, a lot of them disappeared. This one, made in 1887 for Tsar Alexander III, was listed as missing for decades. Then sometime in the early 2000s, a scrap metal dealer in the US bought a strange gold object at a flea market. He paid around $14,000 for it. He didn't really know what he was buying, he just thought the gold alone would be worth more than that. He took it home and left it sitting in his kitchen, and that's where it stayed. For years, he couldn't even make a profit melting it down, so it just sat there unused. At some point, he noticed a small detail on the object and decided to look it up online. That search led him to a list of missing Fabergé eggs. One of the descriptions matched exactly what was sitting on his kitchen counter. Turned out that's exactly what it was. The egg, which had been missing for over a century, turned out to be worth not $14,000, but tens of millions of dollars. One of the rarest objects on Earth had just been sitting in some dude's kitchen. Back in the 30s, the Field Museum in Chicago acquired a Bronze Age sword that had been pulled from the Danube River near Budapest. The sword was sent to the Field Museum in Chicago, but for decades, curators didn't really think much of it because they thought it was just a replica. So it was labeled a replica and shelved in storage. The sword was locked away for almost a century. It sat in drawers and basement collections while museum staff just focused on other artifacts. But in January 2023, everything changed. Curators were preparing a new exhibition titled First Kings of Europe, which was scheduled to open on March 31st, 2023. As part of the prep work, Hungarian archaeologists working with the museum asked to take a closer look at this old replica. Within about 30 seconds of examining it, one expert knew something was wrong with that old label. As Field Museum curator Bill Parkinson said, usually the story goes the other way around, meaning most objects labeled as originals turn out to be fakes, but here it was the reverse. The sword was not fake at all. The sword dates to about 1080 to 900 BCE, which makes it around 3,000 years old. So, after nearly 100 years of being ignored, the sword was finally put on display in the main hall of the Field Museum, one of the oldest and most unexpectedly rediscovered pieces in their entire collection. With all that said, I've been your host, James, and I'll catch you, yes,